Can you whistle? You're not allowed to whistle.
Hey, everyone. There we go. Okay. Real quick, before we get started with our amazing panel and Inspiro team, we're going to have Nick from North Star come up for just a minute. He's got a great tip for us. And then we'll get started before we do our drawing. Woo! Go, Nick.
All right. Hey, I've got a great tip for you guys today. I mean, you just said great tip. So
Great tip.
thinking of something cool. So
Great tip.
sorry, I don't want to stand in front of everybody here, but working with lenders and stuff, I'm doing a lot. It seems like this week I've got a couple going out. So mobile notaries. Who's ever used a mobile notary before? Okay. On a mobile notary is where, if yeah, good question. What is a mobile notary? So mobile notary is someone, let's say you've got a buyer or seller that's out of state or far enough away that it's too far for us to do a signing for. So what we do is we would help facilitate a signing, and usually on the lending side, it has to have a in-person wet signature on a lot of the documents because most lenders still don't allow for electronic notarizations. So what that does is we just really just a heads up on it. There is an extra fee usually associated with that. Most notaries I charge, will charge $170 to do those out-of-state signings. What we do is we just send basically everything to those mobile notaries electronically, including a FedEx slip. And so the notary will basically it works like Uber for docs. We send them the documentation, they contact your buyer, they'll connect with them, set up a time to sign. They'll sign all the documents and everything in front of a notary, and then that notary will send everything back via FedEx, and then it comes back to me, and then that's when we scan all the documents and work it back in. There is another option. So there's basically three options that I have when there's notary options. One is that in-person notary signing. The second is an electronic notarization, which usually works with sellers. Sellers can be signed via electronic notarization, and that's basically like a FaceTime phone call. It's done through, it's almost like a verification process. They sign all the documents with the notary online, and then that notary, once it's done, they just email me back the docs. It's like instant, and that's usually about $125, just so you know. The third option is if you've got those really conscientious people that want to save money, if they know somebody at a bank or sometimes UPS or things like that, they don't charge. We can just send the docs individually to the people and email it to them, give them a FedEx label, and they can send that back to us. Sometimes people want to do that, or they have a good relationship with their bank and they can just go to a bank, have all the documents signed, and then they just send those back to us. So those things do come up. It's going to happen if it hasn't happened to you already. The main thing we need to know is the contact information and where they're at. When I say Uber for docs, it's kind of like the notaries need to know if, I had one in Alaska a while ago. The notary in Alaska needed to know where in Alaska they are. So they have to find notaries in that area. And if they're not able to do it, I've had situations, another one in Alaska, that we ended up having to do a power of attorney, and it delayed the process a bit. So ask those extra questions if you've got people that are going to be signing with that, and just make sure you know. So if there's any hiccups or anything that we can try and work around it. I feel like I've seen everything, but always something comes up. So
Question.
yes.
Time, like how much longer?
Sometimes
Generally.
generally. So, like this one this week was closing, it's signing today. So usually add on about a day or two because we need to get docs from the lender. And then basically, since you're having this wait a day for those docs to come back, you probably want to add on a day or two to that to your funding date. So if you've got, specific, like if you're really trying to get in before the weekend and you're wanting to have them sign on a Friday, I would definitely try and get those docs probably by Wednesday so that we can sign. Hopefully get them back on Thursday, but then another buffer day just to make sure, because sometimes FedEx is late. Sometimes I had one today that was supposed to sign earlier. They're not signing until 6, which is going to be past FedEx cutoff time. So I'm not going to get my docs out signing today. Probably won't get it back until Friday. So always think of those things. Add, give yourself a couple of days buffer, especially if you're trying to get people into a home. It's always fun. You're always trying to figure out different ways to get things signed for everybody, but there are ways to do it. So any other questions?
Great, no, thanks, Nick.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. My clients get smooth. So, highly recommend it.
Okay, we're gonna do our on-time drawing real quick, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Kind of on time. Get it win twice.
Okay, let's see.
What's the number?
667-636-4.
All right. I've got 10, 25, and 50 in here.
Freaking off my one.
Me too. 25.
Behind me and one.
You are lucky.
A little bit later.
You guys, just a couple of announcements. Don't forget, our next summit is on October 10th. We're gonna have an amazing panel of some powerful women up there and a great discussion. And you guys, it's we're actually celebrating breast cancer awareness.
And wear pink.
And we're pink. All of
Jordan's
you,
got a shirt on
there
already.
you go. Jordan's ready to go. We got Bob up here with the little pink. But you guys come in and if there's something you would like to donate, please bring that as well. It's gonna be a great discussion, so don't miss that, okay? Put that in your calendar. And then you guys, Pumpkin Patch is on October 9th, Centerville is October 2nd. Don't miss that. If there's opportunity of connecting with clients, it's now, okay? So if you have any more questions, let us know. We have our Pumpkin Patch meeting on Monday at 2:30, just because we're trying to finalize
Finalize
a
it.
few more details.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. Does Mark have something for us? I got you.
Mark, you want to just
Mark?
announce yourself real quick? We need to get started, so you got just a minute. Here we
All
go.
right, 1
Explode.
minute, one of the major announcements for American Home Shield, so pay attention, folks. I know I'm not leaving, so that's not it, so. Anyway, for years, American Home Shield has added sales tax onto their invoice. It drives idle crazy, drives mortgage crazy. It's everybody having a tough time with it. As of October 3rd, we will be adding sales tax into our pricing. So when you write the price in on your rep sheet, it will be the price. So you do not have to worry about that anymore. I will be changing out the things there. I will be meeting with the transaction coordinators to make sure they're on board with it. We have one of our leadership team members meeting with Heather tomorrow. So real quickly, that's it. Great announcement. Been waiting for this for a very long time. So thanks for it. Appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Hey, Mark.
Guys, he's always here. His cards are in the room. If you have questions on any home warranty questions or anything else, he's also always participating. He's going to be at our client appreciation event as well. So thank you so much for that. Okay, we have our amazing panel that is getting started with Inspiro Financial. Maybe a round of applause for them first. Get out your questions and comments and just make sure that you're taking great notes. Christopher, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome, George. Did you have anything you want to say before we started, or?
I've always got it.
Yeah, don't ask that question.
I would just say three things. Good to see you guys here. Number one, just keep participating. Number two, make sure you're prospecting. And number three, make sure you're practicing. This is, in fact, I heard a little quote from a dear friend of mine. Some of you know, he's, I won't even mention his name, but he's a really good dude. And he's a little out there online, but very recently, but he said, the business of real estate is very simple. It's just hard to do, but it is not a complicated process. So just remember that this is not complicated. Yet there's a lot of complications into a loan. But when you talk about what an agent needs to do, they just need to be resourceful and they need to be predictable as to what they do every single day. The people I'm seeing succeed at the highest levels even on a national level with interactions that I have, every single person's 3 timesing what they're doing. And the problem is people aren't 3 timesing. They're still waiting, or they're running, or asking the question, should I go get a normal job? And the issue is that you're in a market where you have to do 3 times the amount of work to get what would have been a year ago. So just don't forget that. Again, it's not complicated in the sense it's a very simple business, but the problem is we have a tendency to overcomplicate it. So these LOs, these individuals, and Christopher and Cynthia, Pedro, Bob, Adam, and Dylan, I truly believe are some of the greatest loan officers and some of the best educators in the business. So I'm glad that you're here, but I would just echo to you that sometimes we get concerned about the way in which people may or may not respond, or deals that do or don't happen. And I would just tell you, just don't forget, you need 3 times the leads, the opportunities than you needed before. And if you don't play that game, you'll probably be out of the game, because this isn't going away for the next 18 to 24 months. It's only going to get worse. Just remember that. It's only going to get worse. So if you don't know that and you don't pivot and you don't anticipate that and then innovate yourself with a harder and more stricter work schedule and participate at higher levels, educate yourself at higher levels, which is exactly what will happen today, you're not going to be in the business, or you'll just be doing something else. That's just what will happen. But if you recognize it's going to take 3 times the effort, put forth 3 times the effort, you'll get the results to do that. And I actually love what I'll leave with this. Grant Cardone said something pretty cool, which I thought was kind of fun, which was simply this. That was a loud, holy crap. You get louder because it's right behind your head. But Grant Cardone said, driving, I just got off a flight and I ran here, so I'm like sweating and got all hot and heated. But Grant Cardone, I love what he said. He said, survive till 25. And I think if you take on that mindset, you have a pretty good chance of making it. If you think it's going to get better anytime soon, you are mistaken. But the reality is, if you're wrong, that's great. That's great if it's easier, but don't expect it, right? What do they say? Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And some of you are still in your planning stages of hope. And if you hope for this business to be easier, buckle up, you probably won't be in it. That's just, there'll be a tipping point where you're like, I just better go get a normal job. Or you can continue to pay the price 3 times the way, 3 times the prospecting. If you were doing 1 hour, you need 3 hours. If you're doing 3 hours, literally, you probably need 6 to 9 hours a day. I have agents I'm coaching that pay me to tell them prospect 5 hours a day. If I talk to the Brian Burnett's, he's prospecting 6 to 7 to me is 8 hours a day to get the same results that he got a year ago. But he's still making $3 million this year. So you've got to stop thinking it's going to be easier, and you've got to pay a bigger price to get past the challenges of this market. And if you don't, you're going to be out of the business, or you can just wait. If you wait, maybe you have the holding power, knock yourself out, but that's not how I operate in my life. I'm not going to just wait for the market to change. So with that, it's Chris Jensen.
Thank you.
All yours.
Thank you.
Be resourceful.
Well,
So it's great. It's good you guys are all here.
our team, we're excited to be here today. The purpose of today is to have a panel discussion with our 5 amazing loan officers where we're going to answer any questions that you have. We'll also present some things if you don't have some questions to maybe get the juices flowing. But as George says, we don't know when things are going to change. We know they're going to change. The economics of the situation. We've been through this rodeo a lot the last 100 years. We've seen this cycle before. We know that things will change. We know that interest rates will come down. We know that buyers will get off the fence and start buying again, and people will start to see some activity. We don't know when. Is it going to be next month, next year, 6 months, 12 months? We don't know, but we know it's going to happen. So what can we do to help you in your business, to help you get more educated, to help you understand what's happening out there, programs, guidelines, tricks, little things we've seen that can help you get people off the fence and get under contract and be a little more proactive. So that's the point, the purpose of today is we want this to be interactive. This is not, we're not going to stand up here and just talk to you. We want you to have questions. Those that are online as well on Zoom, speak up. Ruby's over there, we can hear you. If you have a question, just let us know. If you have any question here, no questions, a silly question. We want to make sure that we answer those questions for you and kind of give you some tools. So just to introduce everyone, I'm Christopher Jensen, the president of Inspiro. These are our amazing loan officers. We've got Bob Voller, Pedro Lira, Cynthia DeYoung, Adam Allred, and Dylan Cooley. They all do fantastic work. Between all of them, we're going to be able to answer pretty much any question that you have. If you stump us, we'll make sure we find out what the answer is. And get the answer to you here today on if you have any questions that we don't know. So let's talk real quick a little bit about the market for a couple seconds, and then be thinking of any questions you might have right off the bat. If not, we'll have someone give you some information. But the market right now, it is what it is. No one controls the market. We don't control the market. Rates right now are the highest they've been in over 25 years. We haven't seen rates like this for a long time. Historically, the rates right now are pretty good. If you look at the last 100 years, rates today are really good. It's just that most of you have never seen a rate north of 6% in your life, and your borrowers haven't either, and they're freaked out, right? They don't understand that, right now rates are 7.5%, maybe 8%, depending on the borrower. You get a 1 to 2% lower than that if you do a buy down. We'll talk about some of those things, but that's the highest we've seen rates in, really since the 90s, the mid 90s. So we've got to help and educate people and understand, what's happening. There's a lot of things that cause that, and we could take a whole hour to talk about that, what we want. But the bottom line is, we don't control it. You don't control it, I don't control it, they don't control it. Rates do what they do, and buyers will buy regardless. We just want to help them understand why now is the time to buy and why they shouldn't wait. We can talk more about that. So with that said, are there any pressing questions that any of you have right out of the gate before we turn something over to somewhere else? Any questions that any of you have about a loan, a product, market, conditions? I'm struggling with this on my contracts. I need to know this about a certain product. Anything that you have right out of the gate that we can answer for you. Okay, well, let's we thought that might be the case. So let me ask a question of you. Have any of you, and we'll have Cynthia help answer this question a little bit. Have any of you in your career asked for seller concessions on any of your contracts? Or maybe I should say, any of you not asked for seller? That's probably a better question. Have any of you not, when I say seller concessions, you know what I'm talking about? Seller paying closing costs. Have any of you not asked for that in your career? Come on, you've all asked for seller concessions on your contract. Okay, no.
From a buyer.
From the seller. No, you've asked the seller. So you have a buyer as a client that's buying a house, and you're gonna offer $500,000 on this house, but you want the sellers to pay $10,000 in closing costs, or you want them to help pay $15,000 to buy the rate down. Did any of you not ask for some type of, when I'm talking, that's the kind of concession, a lending concession, where they're going to give money to help the borrower, your client, buy a rate down or pay for their closing costs? Have any of you not done that before?
Sure.
Okay. You have or you haven't done it?
I have. I've not, I mean, like, I guess we're getting confused.
Yeah, have you
So
not
I have
asked
a
for that?
buyer and I've had to ask the seller for a concession.
Have you never done that before is what I'm asking
I
for?
have never done that
Okay.
once upon a time.
Okay,
You've never asked for a seller concession,
Like, I.
seller paid closing costs?
Are you
Every-
saying to this day, have you never?
You've never done it before. You've never done it. You represent buyers. I'm sure you have. That's a long time to die.
They're paying the whole warranty.
Yeah.
Not every time, obviously.
I'm just saying,
But yeah.
because we're talking to agents, and some of you have been in the market less than 10 years.
A long day.
Well, we're still here. This is one of the things I want to talk about today, because this is something that in the last 5 years, it's been a seller's market. You oftentimes couldn't ask for any seller.
Very rare.
Very rare. And
Very
it was tough. And so a lot of agents got in the business the last 5 to 10 years. And so they've never been in a market where I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know how to start. I don't even know what to ask for. I don't even know what's appropriate. So if you want us to talk a little bit up to that point on.
Sure. I actually had a semi-seasoned agent come in my office last week and was like, I've never written a contract asking for it. How do I write it? I was like, well, let's talk about it. How long has the property been on the market? Have they had offers? Have they fallen through? Have they reduced the price of the house? Oh, they haven't. Well, that's a really good negotiating tactic. So, I mean, it's interesting to see agents come in that have written it before, but really don't know, how much is closing costs going to be? They don't want to get overly involved, but that's where you get the winning offers. You get your clients the house that they want coming in with less money. So, I mean, asking the questions and sitting down with a loan officer is so important to understand what it's going to cost to close a loan. And really, for how long the property's been on the market for. What is your buyer willing to offer to get that house? So, that's.
Do any of you have agents or clients, sorry, not agents, but borrowers right now that, they're struggling with, coming up with a down payment right now because prices are really high, right? Compared to what they're scrimping every penny they have just to come up with some kind of a down payment. Do you guys know what most typical closing costs are on a loan? Any idea? What do you think percentage wise of the purchase price? So I'm buying a $500,000 house. What percentage of my loan amount is going to be in closing costs, Heather?
Well, I always think 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when I recently had to deal with my brother, I just told my brother, it's like, ask for 20,000. I'm like, what?
Right.
And that was way higher than I expected.
So did they accept it?
The first offer we didn't get anywhere with. The second offer was, we had to really negotiate hard to get 10,000.
Uh-huh.
We asked for 15.
Uh.
And it didn't come together. And then finally we did get one because the house had itself had failed because the person couldn't qualify.
Right.
And that's when we were able to come in and get the 15 that we needed.
Okay, so you got $15,000 in seller concessions on house. Now somebody's like, I've never, how do you do that? I've never heard that. I wouldn't even dream to ask that. I'd be embarrassed to ask that.
Yeah, I was terrified.
Yeah, they're gonna laugh in my face.
Cindy, I can't ask for $15,000.
But what we did though,
Yeah.
too, with the 15,000 is made it more affordable for the buyer. Because it is such sticker shock when they've been renting, living with family, trying to save up the money for the down payment, putting themselves in a more financially stable place to buy, that doing those buy downs, asking for the concessions. We just did a purchase with Edge Homes and they gave $20,000 in concessions. And we bought down their interest rate over a whole % with the concessions. So it makes a difference in getting them qualified, them feeling comfortable with the purchase, because you might as well ask the question, because it's always gonna be no if you don't ask. And your clients probably won't wanna buy that house anyway, because it doesn't feel affordable to them at the moment. So I say ask, always ask. Don't write a contract without talking to your loan officer.
Well, I've
Let's
been
talk
noticing,
about it.
I've been paying attention now too, because I asked for so much and I thought it was crazy, but. If you look at the sales, you're starting to see, you still see the 5 and the 2,000 but I'm starting to see $15,000 and $20,000 concessions. On sold.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna bring up the situation that I ran into just the last couple of days. I've got a client that thought they had more down payment and closing costs than they actually do. And the agent wrote the contract without talking to me about what closing costs are gonna be. They can't close the deal now. They don't have enough money for down payment and closing costs. So we've got to figure something else out.
And that's embarrassing, right? To go back to solve this particular fight, the agent may have to go back and say, hey, we actually need $7,000 in closing costs. Chances of the seller saying great are not super high. Well, if they'd asked for it up front, much higher probability. It's super critical in this market today that you are working one-on-one with your loan officer before you make offers, just because you've likely not in the last 5 years had to do that. You just needed to get an offer in and make it the strongest offer possible. And whatever the price is, it's the price is. And I don't need to worry about closing costs. I don't need to worry about seller concessions. I just need to worry about price, because there's a long line of people that are behind buying this house. We've got to get this one going, right? That's not the market right now, is it? That's not what we're seeing. We're not, I mean, you still every once in a while seeing multiple offers, but for the most part, we're not seeing 20 offers lined up for a property. And you really need to work hand in hand with your loan officer so you understand exactly what the costs are associated with that loan, because more often than not, you can negotiate it to get it paid for. So let's talk about what some of those things are. Team, what are some of the things that can be paid for? Maybe some of you all know. Let's just tell them some of the things that can be paid for in seller concessions, as far as what closing costs can they pay for and ask for.
Rate buy down.
Okay, rate buy down. So do any of you, who's done a rate that you know of? Have you done a buy down on a purchase that you've done? Okay. Great. Rate buy downs are amazing, because what we say rates right now are in the mid to high 7s. You can buy the rate down anywhere from 1 to sometimes even 3%. So what that means is, let's just say we do, it's called a 2-1. Well, let's explain a 2-1 buy. Who wants to explain a 2-1 buy down? So I'm not talking. Bob, you explain what a 2-1 buy down is?
So a 2-1 buy down would be your interest rate for the first year would be 2% less than what it is the market rate or the par rate. And then the next year it's 1% less, and then it goes to the market rate.
Okay, so for 2 years in a 2-1 buy down, you're getting a subsidized reduced rate, right? And then starting in year 3, the rate is what the market rate is today. Why do you think that's such an advantage? Any ideas why? Number one, they're getting in at a lower house payment, right? So it's not like much of a sticker shock, but why else might that be an advantage? Yeah.
It gives them more time to potentially save and to adjust for any. I guess the main advantage would be that they're waiting for the rate to shift. So if the rate does shift, by the time that rate goes down, then they can refinance, and they've got that subsidized loan until then. If not, then there's always the option they could sell, or maybe they have a shift in earning capacity or something. It just gives them more time to do whatever they're wanting to do.
You got it. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. The biggest thing, like we mentioned before, is we know rates are gonna come down. This is not a guessing game. Rates are artificially inflated right now. The Fed has artificially inflated rates by at least 100 basis points. So by at least 1%, possibly even 1.5%. So rates right now, 7.5 higher percent. In a normal market, rate should be 5.999 today is what we should see rates at. Yeah.
I was gonna add to that too. It seems like all consumers are optimistic from the standpoint of what they can afford. And obviously they still have to qualify for the higher rate. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And so they qualify and are capable, according to the bank, to loan the money at the specific thing. But I just like the fact that it, you know, and I'm not saying just buyers of homes, like I'm optimistic when I'm buying a new iPad, or, you know, you're just always like, yeah, I can do this, you know, right? That's just kind of how it works. And I think that helps with that optimism when they see getting a better deal right now, a lower interest rate, and I'll figure it out down the road.
And that's a great point. I think that's very true. We all are living under rainbows and sunshine when we buy a house because we're super excited. And we have to be smart about it. But I think in this particular situation, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we did no buy downs. We would never do a buy down because you get a rate 3.5%. They were still available, but why would you do that? Today, it makes tons of sense because we know rates are going to drop. We know sometime in the next 24 months, rates are going to drop. And that borrower is going to be able to get at a lower rate and be able to refinance their property within that 2 years. I'll come back to you, Brandon, in a second. And what happens is, let's say they refinance in a year, whatever amount of money they did not use of that buy down dollars gets used as a principal reduction towards their balance. So it's like free money, right? So let's say it costs $20,000 to buy a rate down, for example, for a 2-1 buy down on a particular house. And they buy today, and then in 12 months, rates get down to 5.5%. They want to refinance. Great, let's refinance your property. Well, they've only used half of the $20,000 for the buy down. What happens to the other $10,000? It gets applied towards their principal reduction. So it's like buying their house for an extra $10,000 cheaper than what they actually bought it for. That money doesn't go to waste. It gets used. Okay, so it's a win-win-win the whole time. And if they go the full 2 years before the rates adjust, well, great. The rate's probably going to be lower than it would be anyway. So it's a positive thing for them to take advantage of these buy downs. How do we calculate the cost? Cynthia, how do we calculate the cost on a buy down? What tool do we use to do that?
So we actually have basically an Excel spreadsheet that will take the difference in interest and calculate it out for, we'll say either 12 months, 24 months, or 36 months. And that gives us a dollar figure of the difference in interest rate from, we'll say if it's 7.5 today, and it's 5.5 for your first year, 6.5 for your second year, it's going to calculate all together.
So
The difference in interest.
So there's a calculator, a buy down calculator, like you said, a spreadsheet that we can use. So there's not some generic number we can just give you. This is what it costs to buy a rate down. It depends on the borrower's, well, the loan amount that they're buying it for, how much they're putting down, you know, what kind of rate they're going to be able to qualify today, depending on their credit score. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So again, it leads to why you need to communicate with your loan officer. Don't just assume, oh, $10,000 is going to cover it. It may not be $10,000. It may be $12,453. We're going to find out exactly what that is. You need to make sure you're communicating with the loan officer because every deal is different in regards to different things.
Yeah, so question on rate buy downs. First one, does the seller have to pay for it? Does the seller have to pay for the buyer's rate to buy down?
Okay, so there's a couple things that go with the rate buy downs. If you're doing a temporary rate buy down. Typically, if the buyer is going to be contributing some of the funds to the buy down, rates are different. If the seller is solely doing it, then yes, they do it. But if for some reason your buyer contributes money, when they refinance, and let's say they don't use all of the funds, they do not take that off the principal reduction, just so we're clear.
Okay, so it's better to have the seller pay for the full buy down.
Always, yep. Do not let your buyer pay for any of it because they will not be able to keep
Or
those
the
funds.
builder, in case our builder, who's the seller.
Is there a max on a permanent buy down?
Well,
Max
it's,
cost? No.
it's hard because we,
Look, question.
yeah,
You get to a point where it's not worth it
yeah.
to do the buy down, so it may cost way more money to move the interest rate just a little bit, so.
A permanent buy down, you're never gonna be able to reduce it 1 to 2%.
Right, no, so I guess my point is on that is for advertising purposes, let's say I have a listing that's hard to sell and I wanna advertise a certain rate. And a certain payment or whatever to entice buyers, what's the best way to do that?
That's awesome. It's like any other, what we would suggest or what I would suggest, is just like any other time you list an interest rate on a property or you solicit anything about the terms of a loan.
Sure.
You've got to put in what the parameters are on the listing. So
Sure.
what I would do is we can give you the amount, say it's a $500,000 house.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, we're gonna offer, and we do the calculation for someone that's got a 740 FICO score and gonna put 10% down.
That's your
okay?
fine print.
And then that's the fine
Right.
print, and then we do the math and say, we're gonna offer you $20,400 to apply down, so you can start at 5%. And that's a huge, if you're not doing that, you're missing out a massive, I mean, thanks for bringing that up. That's a tip of the day to take away on any of your listings. You should be offering interest rate reductions and what your sellers are gonna do in seller concessions, because that's gonna attract eyeballs and get people to your property where it's not gonna get to someone else's property, because no one else is really doing that. If two comparable properties, both at $500,000, and the client's looking at both of them, but this guy over here is offering a $20,000 concession to get that down to 5.5%. And this person isn't, of course they're gonna go over here, right?
Right.
And because this borrower, this agent aren't thinking in those terms, well, we'll offer it if someone asks us for it. I would be proactively offering it, saying, hey, we can get you 5.5%, we're gonna give you $20,000 in seller concessions, come buy my house.
Right, and my point is if you're offering that permanent rate of buy down with those parameters, at the end of the day, a buyer can use it for a 2-1 or 3-1 or whatever they want to.
Yeah.
I just meant for, yeah.
Well,
For,
if the listings, talk to the LOs, they can give you those numbers, so that you're speaking correct terms on, based on the demographics of that particular offer.
Do people
Yeah.
understand the very, very basics of a 2-1 buy down, like what that even means?
I think Bob just explained
I
it,
just
yeah.
wanna make sure, like, everyone understands that, right?
Any questions about that?
Well, Chris,
I mean,
I
I'm just saying is just,
Yeah, they may not.
I'm certain there's a handful of people in here that wonder, I mean, the debt to income ratios, are they based on the two points that
No.
they get that reduction, or
Today's rate.
on the par rate?
Today's, you have to qualify for the rate that it is today. Yeah, the qualification doesn't change, it's just the payment subsidized, but you have to qualify in today's rate. So the US.
Which is sometimes why doing a permanent, buy down from, we'll say 7.5 to 7 makes the most sense, because your buyer is not gonna qualify at the 7.5. Where they would feel more comfortable on a 2-1 buy down, but they just can't make the transaction work that way. The other thing I was going to say is when writing contracts for seller concessions, I always use the up to 3% or 4% or 6%, because if sellers are agreeing to do it, let us figure out ways to pay HOA dues for the entire year, get them a better home warranty. Just, we have so many options. I know, Aubrey and I did a transaction earlier this year that, what was it, 3 days before closing, we had extra funds and we reduced our interest rate even more because we had extra seller concessions. So we were able to do that.
So do you wanna explain to everyone what the max seller concessions are on each type of loan?
Absolutely. So FHA is up to 6%. Conventional, if you're doing 5% down, it's 3%, 10% down is 6%. And then I believe after 20%, it's 9. So, and VA is 6 as well.
Yep.
So, you have a lot of opportunity to take advantage if the seller is willing to give the funds right up to, don't put a dollar figure on it, because when we're held to that, and we don't want to give the seller back more money if we don't have to.
So I think it's important to understand, when we're talking about a $500,000 home, if I'm doing FHA or conventional over 10%, that's $30,000.
Think about all the things we can do with $30,000.
You do a lot with 30 grand, you
It
can
goes
buy
a
it
long
right
way.
down a ton, closing costs.
Well, and you're funding their escrow account, you're paying their property taxes, their homeowners insurance for the first year, paying for a rate buy down, title fees, transaction coordinator fees. I know I've pumped up TC fees when we've had extra funds left over, like, hey, why not?
Yeah,
So-
buy a 2 or 3 year warranty instead of a 1-year warranty.
Exactly.
Little things we could do.
And I just had a question, so, to buy down a rate, depending on the price of the home, that varies too, so make sure you're asking before you're putting that.
There's no number we can factor saying, okay, it's 0.35% of the loan amount is the cost for a buy down. There's no rhyme or reason to the cost to get a permanent buy down. It just depends on the interest rate and the borrower's credit score. So every situation is completely different. That's again why it's so critical you ask and find out what that is. But we don't want to leave money on the table for sure. You know, why Cynthia is saying is what she's saying is if you put a dollar amount and we don't use it, then the underwriter is going to want clarification and more documentation. Just make sure life in our life more of a headache because we have an actual figure on there and we didn't need it. So a percentage up to they're not going to care as long as we don't exceed that percentage, and we don't have to go back and get more documentation for the underwriter. So it saves a lot of time and effort. Yeah.
Can you do a combination of a hard buy down and a 2-1 buy down?
I mean, yes, technically.
Yeah.
So you could, like, let's say rates are 7.5. And you wanna buy it down to 7 and then do the 2-1 buy down. I've done that before.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
It can be. I mean, we did a transaction earlier this year with Edge Homes where our clients, great, we had to do the permanent with the 2-1 buy down.
For the qualified.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What did you get the rate down to on that? Do you remember?
4.65.
So just very quickly again. What they're presenting to you right now is gold. Let me explain why. How many of you are getting objections from buyers saying, I'm gonna wait until the what? Rates come down. But we don't know when that's gonna be, but we do know it's gonna go down. The challenge with that is if it's 6 months from now, 18 months, 24 months from now, we're gonna be back in the same situation, if not worse than we were 2 years ago, which is what? Could buyers who wanted to buy a home legitimately buy a home?
No.
The vast majority, no, because there was way too much what? Competition. And if they could get the home, they were paying $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 more than the list price. Do you all remember that?
Yeah.
Right? So what the buyers are saying is, well, I'm gonna wait until the interest rates have gone down. So now you can present to them a solution to that objection. It's called the 2-1 buy down or the permanent buy down. So if you're not explaining this and you don't have a grasp of it yet, all you have to do is say, I have an opportunity for you now where you can avoid competing with 20 other buyers and paying $100,000 more for the home. You can get the home today and get that old interest rate, which would be interested in finding out how to do that. Yes, let me have you talk to Bob, Pedro, Cynthia, Adam, or Dylan, and let me show you how you can do that. Remember that. But you have to be willing to confront them on that and say, okay, I understand you want to save on the interest rate. We can actually do that today and present that to them. Don't be afraid to lead them through that process as opposed to buying off and say, okay, well, let's just wait and see what happens. Because if you think interest rates are going to go down in 6 months from now, you're sorely mistaken.
That's such a great point, because if interest rates do come down, prices automatically are gonna go up because of the demand. But then not only that, they're gonna pay above the first price.
Right.
So just, if you can, just talk about, so to his point, that's what I always use, like when during this time frame, I always use the words, unique strategies and tools in order to help you get into a home. Like really almost mystifying what it is that we're going to do to help people come in and like really sit down and understand the depth of how to get it all done today. Because a lot of people aren't even willing to like, I mean, how many of you have had it where people literally just won't show up because they're just listening to the media, so they just can't even comprehend themselves. Yeah, getting a loan. I know you have. I know I anybody else? I mean, like where they just literally have completely shut off the idea that it's not even possible. And then just add on to that, talk about, and if it was addressed, but which is sometimes I don't even know if we hear it. Like, you understand that if the home and price or interest rates went down, there can be a refinance, and what happens with what I still don't think that a 2-1 buy down is formally like where's I may not have heard this. Did you talk about where the money sits? Did you talk about how it makes up the payment? You did make up that, and then you talked about how to refinance. I mean,
Yeah, we talked about, it sits there and it subsidizes the payment, and then if anything that's left over is, depending on who paid for it, is principal reduction balance, usually if the seller paid for it. So it's like free money, that comes back tomorrow.
it's also no risk situation.
Oh,
Because
the total number.
the point is they get the money back, and
Yeah.
I just, guys, you have to sell it. You may know it, but I'm fascinated as to how hard it is for people to sell this. Like, this is just not a hard sell, but you've got to figure out how to sell the idea of a 2-1 buy down. Not even just logically understand it. How do you sell it? How do you make it to where they are so like, whoa, you mean we could qualify? You mean if rates go down, we get our money back? Yes, like, I don't understand why you're not pulling the trigger. Well, what if rate, I mean, do you believe, I mean, you could just say, do you believe rates are gonna go down over the next 2 years? I don't know anybody who does anybody not believe rates are gonna go down over the next 2 years? How many, do people think rates are gonna go higher over the next 2 years than what they are today?
It could.
I didn't say, I didn't say they couldn't, but what do you believe? What do you believe?
They're going down.
Good hell, let's talk, go! Dude, are they going up or are they going down?
Going down.
Up and down.
I think they're going up.
You could say they could, tell me what's gonna make it go over 8%, because it really hasn't. It's been right in alignment with what everyone said it would be.
Yeah.
They said it's gonna be tipping, teetering right at 8.
Yeah.
I think 1 day, 2 days, or for a week, it like teetered into the 8. Is it in the 8s?
Yeah.
But do you think, that's fine, do you think it's gonna go higher?
I don't think it'll go much higher because they anticipated this in this price.
Exactly, so my point is where is it going? So how are you selling the idea of getting a loan? You know logically everything these guys have to say, but if you can't sell it, you're not gonna convince anybody of it. You have to be able to sell it.
And George, to that point though, if you're having a hard time grasping this, they don't have a hard time grasping it. So Cynthia gave you something just a few minutes ago. She told you that she had a borrower who got the rate bought down to what? What'd you say it was?
It ended at 4.625.
4.625. Is there any one of your buyers today who wouldn't do something now if they could get that rate? And the answer is what?
All of them.
Every one of them would do it. So all you have to say is, would you be interested in getting your rate as low as 4.5%, 5%? If you could get a rate of 4.5%, 5% in today's market, would you want to buy a home? And what are they gonna say?
Yes.
Then let me have you talk to fill in the blank. Does that make sense? I get that you should understand the detail on this, but if you're not grasping at this point, it doesn't mean that you have to get a doctorate on it. These people understand the process. All you have to do is connect the dots, get your borrower to Cynthia or Pedro, or Adam.
Awesome.
Yeah, come sit down with us if you don't understand or you want to see how the calculation works so you can present it better to one of your buyers. Come sit with us. You can print it out,
I
show it
agree
to
that,
you.
but you have got to be able to sell it.
Yep.
Right, but if
Right,
they
I
don't,
mean,
if they can't
I
see it, touch
totally
it, feel
agree
it,
with
they
you,
can't
so
sell it.
just remember, you can have all the knowledge like what she's talking about, but if you can't sell it, it ain't going anywhere. Because people are in so much fear, they're in so much unrest, and I totally agree with Cynthia, like, you guys need to understand it. But it's not just understanding it, it's taking the model of what you understand and saying, okay, how do I reduce the fear? How do I make sure they feel safe? How do I reduce the risk? How do I help them feel comfortable? How do I get them to move forward? If you just brush over this without thinking it has to be sold, they won't get it. Because they're listening to the media more than they're listening to you. They're listening to the doom and gloom of the day more than they're listening to the light and the hope and the possibility that you bring. So you've got to get really good at selling this. Like, you gotta get really committed to going, okay, every buyer I meet needs to understand this, not only logically, but the sale of the reduction of risk, the reduction of fear, the elevation of safety, the separating yourself from the competition. This is an incredible way to do it. And yes, you need to know a little bit of the logistics of it or the logic of it, but man, you've got to commit to being able to sell it. Because if you can't, it ain't going anywhere. It just won't for any of you. So make sure you really understand how to sell it. Practice it, rehearse it, internalize it. Yes, get with Cynthia, Pedro, and others, like, but figure out how to sell it.
It's a huge opportunity right now that people just don't get because of the fear George is talking about. Because of what the doom and gloom they see on TV, because of wars, because of inflation, because the Fed continues to hike up the Fed funds rate. Because we're gonna go into a mini recession for sure. We're probably already in one. We've been in one, right, for 2 years in the housing industry. Is people naturally think that when things are gonna get bad, that means rates are gonna go down and prices are gonna drop. And that's a false narrative, but we have to make sure people understand that they're misunderstanding what's gonna happen. They're misunderstanding the economics and the finances of it. And you have to sell that and teach them those things, because in their mind, they're just thinking, I'm going to wait until things get better, whatever better means. I'm gonna wait until rates drop. I'm gonna wait until home prices come down. Well, I'm telling you, right, if home prices do come down, they probably will, because they'll have to at some point a little bit, but they haven't come down hardly at all this year. And what's gonna happen when rates do come down, to Ruby's point, is we have tens of millions of people that have that mentality right now. I'm waiting. And the second the rate gets into the low sixes, high fives, none of them are gonna wait anymore because they can't. They just gotta get a house. And what happens when the entire country starts buying houses? Prices go through the roof. And so any savings someone saw by rates going from 7.5% to 5.5% gets wiped out because that $600,000 house is now worth 700. It's being tons of prices and you got 25 offers and people are paying 50,000 over and they get super frustrated and they don't buy then either, right? So you need to explain to them why buying now is, and it's counterintuitive. Warren Buffett says, buy when no one's buying and stay out of the market when everyone's in the market, right? Everyone that bought during COVID overpaid probably a little bit, and now they're suffering a little bit for it. They got a good rate, but they probably overpaid a little bit compared to today's pricing. You won't have that today. You've got to explain that to your borrowers, because also when the prices go up, all these things we're talking about, buy downs, seller concessions, you can forget about that. If I'm a seller and I'm in the middle of the hottest purchase market this country's ever seen, which is what we think is going to happen, you think I'm going to pay $1 to sell my house? No way, because I've got 50 people that are willing to pay me $100,000 more than what it's listed for. I'm not going to do any seller concessions. Where now you have sellers willing to do stuff. They're willing to negotiate. They're willing to move off of their price to help your client get into the home. So you've got to have and be able to sell this narrative and explain it to people why they've got to change their reference and the way that they're thinking. And I'm telling you, they will thank your lucky stars if you do, because you're going to walk them into some massive instant equity here in the next 2 to 5 years because they bought today and didn't wait until the market changed. Yeah.
This is a question for the brokers. I mean, are we already implementing this into role play in the morning?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about it today while we were doing our coaching session. It's just so important to believe it, be confident in it, because that's what is being relayed to your client. To George's point, you're their main point of contact. If you don't believe it and you can't confidently let them know, hey, there's a great possibility for you to get into the home and save money. I've showed scenarios where you can save, if it's under $600, $300, $400 a month. And if people just want to save, they can probably afford more, but it's all about the payments. So if you don't confidently know how to explain it, get with the LOs, come to us, we'll talk about the dialogue. And you just have to logically and practically understand it enough to sell it and enough to be confident in it. And if you don't believe it, you can't sell it. First of all, knowing how to negotiate it and then knowing the programs.
Yeah.
I missed a little bit, but I thought I heard some talk about the VA loan. Is anyone on the panel a VA loan specialist?
Any
I think all of us are.
You have a question about a VA loan?
Who does a lot of them?
Any of them can help you. So
Yeah, any of us.
You have a specific question, you can ask it now. If you want to wait till after, come up and ask any. That's great too.
Can I share something? I prepared something for you guys, for FHA conventional loans. Can you pass this around? I want to pass this around. Can you help me, please? I just wanted to pass this around, please. What I wanted to share is, I think to George's point, he says you have to be able to sell it. And I think one of the most important skill sets that we can get as a real estate agent is understanding, as a real estate agent right now, what you mentioned was we have to do more prospecting, double the time, double the effort. But we also have to, as a real estate agent, understand the role of the loan officer and understand more about the loan products. And I wanted to share a couple of golden nuggets when you're interviewing, filtering your clients, what type of questions to help you understand what they can qualify for. So in your interview with your client, I wanted to see, it's 3 for 1. Yeah, that's 1. Okay. So I wanted to see, I did an FHA, I did this FHA, I broke this down this morning so I can share with you guys, because I think it's important for you guys to understand the difference between a conventional loan and an FHA loan, but the rate, the payment, and the income that they have to have. So if you're interviewing somebody and you know that they make $35 an hour, I broke it down so you guys can use the cheat sheet. They would be able to qualify for $380,000. Or if they're making $49 an hour, I broke it down as an hour, a monthly income, and salary. And you would figure out kind of in your mind with this cheat sheet, you would understand what they would qualify for. But so sometimes we get clients and they make $22 an hour. It's a great client they want to purchase. We understand that they need to have a borrower, a full borrower coming into the transaction. And if they want to buy in a 400,000, then you can go to your cheat sheet. You don't have to carry this, but this is just an example to give you a little nugget to, when you go into an interview, understand, okay, if they want to purchase a home that's 450, they have to be about $45 an hour. So they need to have two people there. And it's going to vary. This is just to give you guys an idea to see what you need to do. So when you're talking to your client, understand that if they're making $32 an hour, they might need somebody else for those $10 an hour to be able to reach those 450. So I just wanted to share a couple of those things. And I gave this little graphs, I made them up this morning just to give you an idea. I also compared like Utah Housing, down payment assistance, their payments, the income that they need to have, and also with the conventional loans. So you guys, I'm not gonna take too much time. I wanted to share it, but I wanted to let you know that you guys can come in, talk to one of us. If you guys want to see the difference and the advantage that we have today, FHA has a better rate, it has a better payment. If we can get them into an FHA product, it'd be better for them. But sometimes they already have a home. And sometimes we have to go on and they want to keep it, retain it as an investment, then we have to go on a conventional loan. Okay, but anyways, I shared this information with you guys. I just wanted to make sure you guys have it because it's important in your interview to be able to understand their income and be able to ask those find out questions with your clients. So you kind of know mentally a little prequel where they need to be at. Okay.
That's great. You can share it online, but this one's the conventional one. Do you have the FHA one? You can send out that guideline.
Yeah, they're both on there.
That's a lot of, yeah, but
I was just gonna ask a question. Just, so say I'm in this room and I'm like, man, I wanna make a social media post. I know I can't put a rate on there. But are there other guidelines, and maybe Russ needs to chime in on that? I'm just wondering from a real estate standpoint, there's no reason I couldn't say, hey, friends and family, if you're feeling like now is not a great time, there's ways to get a better interest rate and all that. I'm totally safe to.
totally safe to say
do
that. You shouldn't quote rate terms, that's you're not a loan officer, that's against rest, but you can't do that. And see if you'd be upset and all that stuff.
Inspiro guaranteed 3%.
Some more big nose with it. But no, you can definitely do that for sure. I mean, and I'll be posting all the time on your social media of why, I mean, hashtag why now's the time to buy. I mean, you need to be pounding that drum like crazy. I mean, because most agents aren't. They're just waiting for times to get better before they do anything. And if you can really explain it, differentiate yourself from everybody else, you're gonna get some eyeballs and people are gonna say, well, why or how, or what can I do? That's where we can help you and what those social media posts can do.
Well, one of the things we say here is that my SOI expects me to be their real estate expert. My SOI expects me to be the real estate expert. And I think everyone's saying so many great things that I think is so phenomenal for us to make sure that we are the expert on it.
Yes.
And I think you brought up such a great point. It made me think, I've got homes in my neighborhood, like a couple homes that, I mean, these are $600,000, $700,000 homes. This sold for $1 million in the heat of the craziness that was going on. And you sit and say, would you rather have $1 million, you owe $1 million, let's say, it's not gonna be that, but would you rather owe $1 million on this home? Or would you rather owe 700,000 with a 2-1? I mean, there's the argument that, yeah, right now is better for a lot of people.
Way better.
So,
I mean, the last thing you want to do is have one of your clients come to you saying, Christopher, why didn't you tell me the parts of buying? Because this house I've been having my eye on the last 10 years I wanted to buy. My mill was listed at 500,000 2 years ago, or a year ago, or 6 months ago. And now it's 2024, 2025, and it's $100,000 more. You know, why didn't you tell me to buy? Why didn't you tell me this was going to happen? Right? You've got to be the expert in the market. You've got to be able to give them the guidance and the confidence to move forward and tell them why. Right? Give them the why of why they need to move forward. Take the emotion out of it. We can give you the data, the details, the science, whatever you want to call it, the stuff we're talking about is not because we just hope and pray it's gonna happen. This is because the details of the millennials that are sitting on the sideline, when the time in their lives they look to buy, why they're on the sideline, what's gonna happen when rates come back down. But you've got to be able to speak to these things and have the historical information as to why it's gonna happen. Because if I'm your agent, or if I'm your client, and you say, yeah, I just wait for rates to come down, then I go start looking at 6 months or a year, and prices are 25% more than they were today, I'm gonna be ticked, right? I don't care what the rate is, because I just lost out on all that equity and the price of a home. So this is so important. And to Pedro's point, I think that's awesome. Most of you naturally inclination is, I don't ever want to do an FHA loan. A lot of experienced seasoned agents, I don't want to do an FHA loan because it's harder, right? This myth that it's harder. Are FHA loans harder than conventional
They're
loans?
way easier.
Way easier.
So are VA.
Rates are lower than conventional. You can qualify easier. The guidelines are less restrictive on FHA than conventional. What's that?
Less money down too.
Yeah, what else? Less money down. What other, some other advantages is why you want to go to FHA?
6% seller concessions,
Higher seller concessions, okay?
MI typically is lower,
credit score, way lower.
which I was gonna bring up another point, and I know Bob needs to talk about credit, and this is something that's so important. When you're qualifying your clients, like, I can't tell you how many people in the last 2 weeks I've been referred, and they're like, well, they just don't know that they can. So get them in front of a loan officer, because chances are they can, they're just afraid to start the process. So if you can get them in front of us, and maybe 3 months, and maybe 6 months. I mean, Nick and I have been working on a transaction since February. We're like, we're gonna do this in October. But sometimes it takes coaching and really helping your clients understand that they can do it. But, you know, credit is a huge problem. But again, with FHA, we did a loan back in June with a 580 credit score. So
Yeah, you can get maximum financing on an FHA loan with a 580 credit score. So
Which,
just
if you don't know, it's
3.5%
not very
down.
good. Yeah, not very good.
Nobody else will qualify.
You can have mortgage lates up to 2 in the last 24 months. There's
Limited credit history.
another thing with FHA is you can go up to like 55% debt to income ratio. As long as your front end ratio is like 45-ish or lower, which is a lot higher than conventional loans.
Now, on FHA, it's a little more work for you. There's like 2 extra forms you gotta fill out. There's an FHA and mandatory clause, and then you gotta fill out. There's an mandatory clause you gotta get signed. So 2 extra papers you have to sign. The appraisal sometimes can be a little bit more picky, right? So if you have a broken window or missing handrail on a conventional loan, we can get by at FHA, you're not gonna be able to slide on it. They're gonna have to fix it, right? So there are a few things that FHA wants to make sure the house is in good shape. But the pros far outweigh any cons on that. Now, we're not saying everyone wants an FHA loan. If you're gonna put 20% down, you have no reason to do the FHA. But don't be afraid of government loans. I mean, government loans, VA, USDA is 100% financing. If you have anyone that qualifies for a VA, they should be doing VA all day long. If you have people that could, USDA, there's only certain areas where you can qualify more rural. But if you have someone in Tooele or on the other side of Saratoga Springs, you know, that it's in USDA territory, get a USDA loan. The rates are better, no money down. I mean, it's fantastic. So don't be afraid of what you don't know because you've never done it before. Lean on your loan officer to help you with those things. So that you can have more tools in your arsenal, so you don't just tell somebody no when we can actually help you say yes. Okay, any other questions about what we've talked about before? Yeah,
Oh, this is a different question.
go ahead.
What are some red flags for your underwriters? Cause I know, you'll see 5,000 carpet allowance or something like that.
Oh, good question.
But you've got to meet some requirements. I'm in that situation right now. It's gonna work out fine, but it's not free money. They can just take out at closing. You know, it's gotta be applied or directed somewhere.
okay, well, you can't do allowances. We'll start there.
These are two, just so you know, Bob and Cynthia are certified DE underwriters that happen to be loan officers as well. So these are 2 underwriters that have been doing this a long time that can answer any underwriting question that you have.
We really don't allow concessions as far as like carpet allowance and things like that. Any concession is gonna go straight to closing costs. I haven't seen anything other than VA where you can pay off debt for a buyer. So other than that, any concession will go to, you know, bona fide closing costs. So carpet allowance, anything like that, it's gotta come off the contract.
Yeah, so don't put them in.
Yeah, please don't, cause they'll come off.
Don't put in, hey, I wanna include the detached hot tub and the swing set in the yard.
We just had that conversation this morning about an addendum on personal property. Bob can probably speak to this because he's been underwriting recently, you know, contracts and things, but being able to,
Yeah, personal property can have no value, and that's the language in the contract.
And if you put it in the contract, it's deemed to have value because you're putting in the contract and then offering them a price. So don't even put that kind of stuff in the contract, because we're just gonna make you take it out, and it's gonna make you look silly to the selling agent, because you're gonna have to go back and say, I have to take an addendum to take this out, right? So avoid that kind of stuff. If you have questions about what you can and can't include, you come talk to Cynthia or Bob, and they can ask any questions about it. Do you have anything to add to that, Bob? as well?
The only thing I'd say is like on the carpet allowance, so if somebody is wanting to get a carpet allowance of like $3,000. You can write it in as seller concessions, which is still really coming back to the buyer. So the buyer, instead of having to pay the $3,000 in selling or in closing costs, they're getting a concession for $3,000, so that money stays in their pocket.
Yeah.
If that
I
makes
mean,
sense,
it's
that's how to
fixes,
sell it,
really,
yeah.
yeah.
That's how to sell it if they really want it. You're gonna pay $3,000 less, and you can use that money to put carpet in.
Adam, I have a question on contracts because you're an agent as well. They still have the verbiage, I believe it's on the first, I think it's on the first page where personal property is left for convenience.
Yes.
Yes.
So when you are leaving, we'll say, I don't know, a hot tub, okay, that's kind of a bigger item, but personal property, making sure you're checking the appropriate box that's left for convenience. Because then it's interpretation of, oh, it's an inducement to purchase, like, hey, buy my house, I got a hot tub and, you know, Sonos system and all this stuff that really should just be left for convenience. So just make sure you're checking the right box, because then an underwriter's gonna come back and ask you to fix it later if you didn't. So.
Is there a specific number for items that are of value, or is it just like?
So if it's personal property, there can be no value, it can't be part of the purchase contract.
Well, an FHA deems a refrigerator personal property, which is so ridiculous.
And,
It's just a
and
refrigerator.
underwriters do interpret it different, so.
They do, but guideline for FHA is a refrigerator is
Right.
personal property, so just leave it as. for
Stove
convenience.
isn't, a microwave built-in isn't, the
Yeah.
fridge is,
It's so weird.
dishwasher isn't.
The rule of thumb is that anything attached to the property, so if it's like a built-in stove. Even a microwave that's attached, then that's not personal property, but anything that can be moved and taken out is. personal
Washer,
property.
dryer.
Right.
So online, they had a question, so the underwriters are Bob and Cynthia, so they can come down and ask questions.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. And then Mike typically made a comment that he's been making calls to listing agents, and 2 sellers just recently confirmed, which yesterday after he's saying quote. Both ones have been able to, they've been on the market for only 2 weeks, and they are willing to do the 2-1 buy downs. So he's like, make the extra calls and just ask the question. More sellers are more willing to do it. If you can negotiate the permanent buy down first and then offer the programs, I think it's amazing. So great job, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And this is a great way for you to get some listings that can turn into buyers is. Some crazy number, like 85% of every single mortgage loan that exists in the United States today is at 3.5% or lower, right? So virtually everyone that has a mortgage loan right now has an amazing interest rate, and they don't wanna give it up, right? So, but they would need to move up. They're in a starter home, they need to go to their second home, but they're so deathly afraid of giving that amazing interest rate. You can tell them, I get it, but let's have you offer some seller concessions to get someone into your house. We'll get someone to pay seller concessions on the house you buy. You're not gonna get 3.5, maybe you're gonna get somewhere in the 5s. That's more mentally acceptable to them than something in the 7s, and then you get them off the fence, right? We've got this huge stagnant people that just aren't doing anything for all these reasons we're talking about. We've gotta have strategies, we gotta have speak talk, we gotta have knowledge to be able to get them off the fence and tell them why they need to move, right? Rather than waiting. Any other questions so far about what we've talked about? Bob, you want to talk a little bit, just we want to go over a couple of credit things. I know in an hour, I don't know if we keep going, if we want to stop with us, we'll go until we say we have to
Well,
stop.
real quick, I
Yeah.
had an agent come in saying that they couldn't qualify because they were looking for FHA homes in an HOA community, and that you guys look at as an expense, correct?
An HOA is an expense, that's like a debt.
Yes.
Any HOA, whether, I don't care what kind of property or loan they get, It's like a debt, so it's like a car payment.
So I just wanted to put that out there that please ask the questions because that could affect their qualification, right?
Always, yeah, in a condo for sure, that definitely impacts your ability to qualify.
With how rates are today, like $150 HOA, how much does that typically take off?
Well, it depends on how much their income is, how much they make, so it's totally different from someone that's $50 an hour to someone that makes 100,000 a year. And how much other debt they have, so it's not a question we could really answer unless we know more about it. But it's going to impact them, it's gonna impact their debt ratios several percentage points, one way or the other, and depending on how close they are to maximizing their qualifications, it could push them over the edge. So that's why a really good pre-approval is so critical about that.
And then Quinn, for that, I think your question is like purchase price.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is just ask us and be like, okay, for every $10,000 for them, it's gonna be at this rate, it'll be $65, whatever it may be. So then just say, hey, for $150 HOA, that'll reduce it 30 grand or whatever it may be. So just come ask us once we get a pre-approval, or if you have a question. That's probably the biggest thing.
Because every bar is different, so
Yeah.
anyone can give you that number of what it is that you know as you kind of go off. And that's any good pre-approval is gonna give you, we're gonna tell you the max they qualify for, give or take a little bit. And then how much their payment would adjust every $10,000 or $25,000, so you kind of know as you're not wasting your time showing them a house that they're just trying to be able to get.
Yeah, or get a pre-approval for a single family home, and then we'll add like an estimated HOA. And so you have an idea there. So, and then the borrower knows as well, because they're like, oh, I'm pre-approved for 400, but in actuality, they're pre-approved for 300 with HOA. So just ask us.
Question. Bob, you want to give us a little couple things on credit we can?
Well, I talked about FHA, about you can go down to a 580 FICO score and still get maximum financing. Another thing, each one of us has worked with borrowers that have less than stellar credit. Well, first, I can't tell you how many times when I've been a loan officer on a transaction where I've had a borrower tell me my credit's not that good. And then I go pull their credit and they have 710, 720. They have high FICO scores. And one of the reasons is people think, oh, well, every month I pay my mortgage on the last day of the month. I'm, almost 30 days late, but I'm not 30 days late. My credit's probably not that good. That's not the case. The way the credit agencies look at it is once you hit 30 days late, then it's reporting on your credit. If you're 29 days late, they don't know. I mean, as far as they're concerned, you're paying on your due date every month. So a lot of people have misconceptions. Medical collections, they may have a bunch of collections. It's not going to affect their FICO score. So if somebody tells you they don't have that great of credit, it's still worth it to take a look at it. And if they do, let's say somebody has like a 575 FICO score, and we pull their credit. We also get information that tells us what their potential score can be also. So they may be at a 575, but have a potential of being at a 620 FICO score. And it may cost them a little bit of money, and it may cost like $5,000 to pay down some of their credit card debt. And what we can do is a rescore with them, and we can put them in a position where they can purchase. And it may only take 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that to get them qualified. But the number one thing is and I usually tell people, it doesn't hurt to start right now and to see where you're at, and let me tell you what you need to do to get to where you want to be. Or I may surprise you and say, hey, you're perfect right now. Let's get it going. So
I'll add something to that real quick. We all have access to simulators to be able to help. When we pull credit, it tells us you can go up 20 points, 50 points, 80 points. It just varies. So with that simulator, we can run it and we can tell the client exactly what they need to do and how to use their funds. We don't want the client going and paying everything off, because we can get the most points with the least amount of funds if they come and talk to us and let us run those simulators for them and educate them how they need to do it.
Randy, do you have a question? How do you do? And how long do those, when you get pre-approved, how long do those letters last? So as you're going through the buying process, you haven't bought something for a little bit.
Mine is one more day than Bob's.
20 days. I mean, your documents are good for 120 days. However, you go buy a new car, you open up a new credit card, you didn't pay your car payment on time, You change jobs, it's all voided at that point because
Any changes? in
any
your
change,
financial-
any material change.
The balance went up on your credit card. Could affect
Their
your,
credit's gonna get pulled again right before the loan closes. And they may think that we don't know because the credit we pull doesn't show that they bought that car, but it's gonna get found out and it will stop things the second we find that out, and they may not qualify and lose their earnest money. One of the things our LOs tell everybody is, I pulled your credit, okay, you were qualified for X, it's good for Y number of days. Assuming nothing changes in your credit profile, it's good forever, right? But the second you do anything, that becomes null and void, so please don't go buy something. Don't go close something, don't be late on something because your credit's gonna get looked at again, and if we see those things, it could change whether you qualify or not, and if you went under contract during that time and put $10,000 down. We're sorry, you're out of luck and you just lost that money, so it's a conversation we have with every borrower, but it's good for you to know. It's something you could talk to your clients about, don't change what's going on in their life.
I think it's a good conversation. Go ahead, sorry.
so, sorry, I was gonna say one more thing. Communication with your loan officer is huge right now because of the rate. Right now, sometimes we don't have a par rate. We do have par rates depending on the type of program or what they qualify for. Because right now, they might have to pay $2,000 or $3,000 to get a 7.8 or a 7.5. So make sure that there's open communication when you're putting offers in. When you have your pre-approval, make sure you sit down, make a phone call and say, hey, how are we doing on the rate? Because right now I have a specific client where they need to pay $3,000. There's no way, and I'm stuck because they said they were gonna get 3% closing costs. They got 0 because they got really excited about this house that they love. It's the perfect house. And they went and put an offer in, but we had them approve with getting at least $5,000 of seller concessions. Because we were adding those with the cost of the rate. So communication right now with your loan officers, it's huge because of the rate.
So you're saying, to clarify, let's say we pre-approved someone 30 days ago. I literally had the same thing happen. Interest rates 30 days ago on that particular day were 7. Today they're 7.5. The agent wrote the offer. They don't have enough money to buy the rate down to 7%, right?
Yep.
So keeping that open communication, you're gonna go write an offer. Hey, what are rates today? Are we looking the same? You know, just keep that communication open because it can be a massive.
Every day, don't, just because we gave you a pre-approval 3 days ago, if you're making an offer today, you better be calling your loan officer today to make sure nothing has changed. Because rates are that volatile, things are changing that much, and to Pedro's point, when we say a par rate means there's usually a rate available that doesn't cost the consumer anything to get. Okay, this is just the rate that you can get, there's no additional costs. Right now, because the market's so volatile, there are days when there's no such thing as a rate that doesn't cost money to get. You have to pay money just to get any rate. Okay, there's gonna be a discount cost to get that, just to get any rate. It's not free, it's called par. That doesn't happen all the time, but we've seen that it's happening right now. So just because someone gave you pre-approval a day ago, 3 days ago, a week ago, if you're making an offer, you better be calling your loan officer the day you are making that offer to make sure nothing has changed. And that we need to ask for a little bit more money than we were asking for, and to make sure that we're doing exactly what we talked about, because things are changing that quickly.
I mean, this could be frowned upon, but I know I've done it in the past when agents are making offers on properties and we feel like it's a pretty good offer. I've gone in and thrown the address into the application and locked the rate that day. With the expectation that it's gonna go under contract and, you know, we really couldn't afford for rates to change. I mean, it's probably frowned upon from anybody. I'm doing it anyway and no one's gotten mad at me yet, so. I'm like, yeah, we can't afford it, so.
A couple of things about credit, just so that you know, you need to be aware of, some pre-qualifying questions to your borrowers. You know, you guys are prospecting a lot, hopefully, right? Prospecting, remember what that is? You're prospecting, and you get really excited about somebody just because they're actually willing to talk to you. And you just want to move super fast because they're willing to talk to you, and someone has a pulse that's showing some kind of interest. There's some pre-qualifying questions you ought to ask about, do they have a job? How long have they had a job? Do they know what their credit score is? Do they know if they've had any issues with their credit? Borrowers don't always know, but you can ask them, have you had a bankruptcy? Have you had a foreclosure? Are you in the middle of a divorce? Because Whether they qualify and how long they have to wait to buy, depending on how they answer those questions, matters, right? So we can help you with that information. Sometimes they have to wait a year, sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 4 years, sometimes it's 7 years if they've had a foreclosure before they can buy something. At no point in wasting your time with someone that's showing some interest that has no way of buying a house for 7 years because they had something go awry. Any comments on that, Gang T?
I think sometimes buyers are hesitant to be honest. With their agent on, you know, maybe some infractions they've had in paying their bills on time, a foreclosure. I know I've run into that where they're like, yeah, foreclosure was like 10 years ago, and it was really like 2 years ago. I was like, ooh. I was gonna find out eventually, but I think, you know, just having that conversation, hey, we really want to be able to help you, like, be honest. I mean, don't say it like that, but I think, you know, if you don't want to talk to me about it, talk to your loan officer.
It's a sensitive thing because it's hard to ask someone's social security number, their birth date, you know how old they are, right? How much money they make. You know, we're gonna see how much debt they have. We're gonna see if their credit. Those are sensitive things that you just don't go around talking to people about, right? You don't even, a lot of people don't even talk to their spouse about it, let alone their parents or their best friends. Now they're gonna talk to a complete stranger about this stuff. That can be hard. Right, that can be hard for some people, and we want to be sensitive to it, but we need to make sure they understand that those are the rules of engagement. That's play. If you get a loan, you're just gonna have to be completely honest, because we're gonna find out anyway. We're gonna know pretty much everything about them at some point in time. So better to be honest up front now to help everybody save time and effort if there are some issues, because we're gonna help them walk through stuff. All the stuff we're talking about, someone doesn't fit the box and you get a loan, we're just not gonna kick them to the curb and say, see you later. We'll give them a game plan and say, here are the things you need to do so that you can buy a house in 6 months, so you can buy a house in a year or next month or whatever it is. So they have a game plan of how to move forward to navigate whatever difficulties they're having right now. And you can be confident we'll be able to give that to them. So, yeah. Pedro.
Pedro, can you also address, so just to the point, whatever you're gonna say, but add to just a discussion just for a minute about, unless you mentioned it, some of the difficult borrowers without social security numbers and how that might be able to work, and you really are the expert of that within the team. You've done so many great loans for people who really would have looked at having no chance of being able to do so.
So there's non-QM loans. Non-QM just means that they're not conventional or FHA. They don't meet those guidelines. And so
But like an example would be like 24 months of bank statements.
Yeah.
As an example, it's not like non-qualifying normal Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan.
So I'll touch up on the bank statements loan program first. Anybody that's a self-employed, they haven't maybe filed their income taxes, or if they filed the income taxes, but they did used all the deductions possible, so they didn't have to pay a lot of taxes. We have loan programs with 12 months or 24 months of bank statements, business and personal. We can look at the different programs available to them with 10% down payment. They can qualify, so they don't have to go and pay an absurd amount of taxes. If they have a business, they can qualify with only 10% down payment using 12 months of their business statements, or if they use their personal account with their personal account. With the I-10 program and also foreign national loans, sometimes they don't even have an I-10. But let me tell you what an I-10 is. An I-10 is a tax ID number that's given to people that are in the process of getting a work visa, but as of right now, they don't have a status, an active status, or a visa approved. They're getting through the process. So that I-10 number, they can use it for credit. They can get credit cards. They can get car loans. They can use it to buy a home, and it's all legal. There's not a problem with it. Okay, so we have programs where they can have 10 or 20% down payment with I-10 loans, where they can get approved for a home. But the rate is much higher because they are higher risk than a regular FHA or conventional loan. So you're looking at rates anywhere between 8.5 to a 10 compared to a conventional loan or a FHA loan. But they need the same amount of documentation. Okay, they need 2 years of income taxes, 30-day pay stubs if they're W-2 employees. Or they can, if they're self-employed, the same way, 12 months of bank statements or 24 months of bank statements.
But they have no MI, right?
And they have no MI. There's no mortgage insurance on these loans.
You do 2-1 buy downs on that? I just never asked that.
As far as we know, no, but we can do a discount point on some of these programs.
Okay.
So, but no, but we cannot do buy downs.
Great. Good information.
Okay, any other questions that are pressing? We're kind of a little over an hour. We hope today was informative. We hope it gave you some ideas of things that you could possibly do to get your folks off the stool and do some things, right? Get them active, understand why it's so important to do something now rather than later. If you need more information, if you need more talking points, come talk to any of the loan officers and they can bullet it out for you. So you can get a script and make sure you're talking to people. So you sound somewhat educated in what you're talking about. We're always willing to talk to your borrowers to help them understand why now is a good time to buy and any questions they have about their loan or pre-qualifying. Just know that we're here. Now hopefully you feel a little more comfortable. You have names to faces. We're all downstairs to the first floor. Come by anytime. We're here to help you to make sure that you can be successful so we can weather this, for lack of a better word, storm that we're all kind of going through to make sure that we get through on the other side and are successful in doing it. So maybe we'll do this again and talk about other topics, but we really appreciate you being here today and have a great week, guys. Thanks.